You're watching Reality Check. It was one thing to have global celebrities like Rihanna and Greta Thunberg drawing attention to the farm protests in India. But now, the spiraling global fallout of India's farm protests appears to have cast a shadow over India's relations with the United Kingdom. An unprecedented debate in UK Parliament on the Farm Bill protests, and it's angered India, prompting India to call the British High Commissioner here to express the government's displeasure. All very unusual, given Britain's status as a close ally and an important trading partner. It all began with a 90-minute debate in the UK Parliament, the outcome of an e-petition that attracted over 100,000 signatures on the parliamentary website, the prerequisite number to trigger what is known as a petition debate. Of the 17 UK MPs who spoke, only one spoke in favour of the Indian government. All the rest, mainly from the Labour Party, Liberal Democrats and the Scottish National Party, raised concerns over the Indian government's reaction to the protests. The first time, apparently, that the government of another nation has officially conducted internal discussions on the farmers' protests. Amongst those who spoke on the floor of the UK Parliament was Tanmanjeet Singh Desi, a Labour MP, who said some supporters of the governing party in India have said this is an internal matter. These supporters say, foreigners, keep your nose out of it. But he said human rights are universal. Protesters are being branded as separatists and terrorists. The UK government, he said, in their desperation to get a trade deal, are failing spectacularly to stand up for human rights. Another Labour MP, Virendra Sharma, said, that I hope that the minister, referring perhaps to the British minister, offers British skills in the attempt to reach a compromise of both sides, bring the issue to a close. The UK government had a response to this debate, a statement by Nigel Adams, who's the UK Minister for Asia. He said that agriculture policy is a domestic matter for the Indian government, and security forces have the right to enforce law and order against illegal protests. But he also said the freedom of speech and the right to peaceful protest are vital to any democracy. And while this is an exciting time for the UK-India partnership, it does not hinder our raising difficult issues. The UK PM's visit to India coming up shortly will be, he said, an opportunity to discuss a range of bilateral issues. Where we have specific and serious concerns, we'll raise them directly with the Indian government. The only MP who spoke in support of the Indian government was Teresa Villiers, a Conservative MP who said complaints about police officers are made here in the UK after mass protests, but that is not evidence that democratic values are under threat in this country, and nor is it in India. Rather than denigrating India with unjustified criticism, we should celebrate it as the democratic success story that it is. India has hit back at all this very strongly. The Indian High Commission said it's a one-sided debate in UK Parliament where false assertions were made. The Foreign Ministry summoned the British High Commissioner and said that the strong opposition to an unwarranted discussion in UK Parliament, it's a gross interference in the politics of another country, India said. British MPs should refrain from practicing vote bank politics. Sources in the British High Commission told NDTV that the UK government does not have a say in organising or rejecting a petition debate. They also said that they do not comment on private meetings with the Indian government. Okay, let me begin tonight by going across to Tanmanjeet Singh Desi of the UK Labour Party, the MP. Thank you for joining us on NDTV, Mr. Desi. You were one of those who spoke out and very strongly. We just saw some of the things you said, criticizing the Indian government. You've seen India's very strong reaction now, Mr. Desi, saying that this is absolutely gross interference, this is vote bank politics. Do you, in the light of this strong reaction by India, have any regrets about the position you took, or do you still stand by it?
Namaskar ji, absolute pleasure, Srinivasan, to be joining your good self and NDTV viewers this evening. In terms of the parliamentary debate this week regarding the human rights of protesters and press freedoms, you'll note that the debate wasn't actually on the farm laws themselves, which, as the minister as well as others pointed out, is a matter to be discussed within India. In terms of the context of the entire debate, I am fully aware that due to lowering incomes, rising debts, and rising levels of suicide. So everybody agrees on the need for agricultural reform. I'm also aware that the government has proposed its 3 new laws, which it says will be beneficial, while on the other hand, the trade union movements or the farming unions within India, they have strongly opposed that because they fear the deregulation or the encroaching privatization or the major corporates moving into the sector. And I'm also aware that all the major opposition parties are opposed to the laws. But that's not what was being discussed. So in terms of, as I said within the debate, that human rights are universal. Why are so many individuals here so concerned? Is because the likes of me, who, although I was born and brought up in Britain, I've had the pleasure and privilege of having studied in India for over 4 years. I took the time to learn and converse in Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu. We've got a love for the nation, and it's wonderful.
So then why right? But, then,
but what needs to happen?
Why the debate then? Why the debate? If you're saying it's an internal matter, what is the human rights issue? What is it that provoked a debate as something, as we said, is unprecedented?
So while laws of any nation, that they are something that's discussed within the polities of that nation, that human rights, things to do with press freedoms, hard-won academic freedoms, press freedoms, Srinivasan, the likes of yourself, to be able to independently portray how you see things, that is crucial. And so when we saw the footage of water cannons, tear gas and brute force being used against peacefully protesting farmers on their way to Delhi, that pained many of us whose parents and grandparents had actually tilled the land within the Punjab, that they had been farmers for decades. And that also is why more than 100,000 people signed an official parliamentary petition. And therefore, it is incumbent for that issue to be debated within Parliament.
But let me ask you this, that what do you make of what the Indian government is saying, though? They're saying that this is vote bank politics, that those like yourself are representing constituents who are largely from India, from the Punjab, and that's really what is driving, these public positions that you're taking.
Well, I think that is very, very disingenuous if anybody was to classify this as just a Punjabi issue or a Sikh issue. We have seen, as I noted within the debate, that there are certain unscrupulous elements, even within the mainstream Indian media, who have gone to great lengths to paint the Sikhs as separatists or terrorists, or for the likes of me, who have dared to speak up about the human rights of those protesters, that they have labeled the likes of myself as troublemakers or as separatists, or we are trolled by hundreds of fake Twitter accounts and profiles, and the 2 rupee a tweet Twitter troll factory comes into full force. But we know that the protests in India have been from different states. There are Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, Christians, farmers and workers. And even if we look at the parliamentary debate, Srinivasan, that was cross-party. So we have
Mr.
not only Labour MPs, but Conservative, Lib Dem, and others
we saw that,
their concerns.
But Mr. Desi, the net result is, you might say that these are all legitimate reasons for you to bring it up, but the net result is that you've ended up angering the Indian government. India, as you know, a very close ally of Britain. Isn't that something which is of deep concern, that now India, there's a strain on India-UK ties as a result of this?
Well, look, Srinivasan, first of all, I think it should always be noted that to speak up about or voice concerns about the policies and actions of the government of the day is not in any way anti-national. It's not anti-India. As speaker after speaker within the debate actually said, that we want stronger ties, and we hope for peace and prosperity within India, as we would want closer ties with other nations as well. But if we see that there is something happening which is are unsavory, or if we feel that there is an attack on human freedoms or academic freedoms or press freedoms, with journalists and trade unionists being arrested, including female activists who it is alleged have faced sexual assault or torture while in custody. And these issues, by the way, haven't just been discussed in Parliament. They have been aired globally on social media and in the media as well. So I think that's why it's important to voice those concerns.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that's the position you've taken. We'll have to see how it plays itself out. But thank you so much, Mr. Desi, for joining us on NDTV.
Pleasure.
Let me go now across to Bob Blackman, who's of the Conservative Party, who I spoke to earlier. Now, Mr. Blackman is actually someone who came out in support of the Indian government. Before we go to him, just a quick context. Mr. Blackman is somebody who's a very strong supporter and an admirer, in fact, of the BJP and the Modi government, has backed the government on a number of issues, including Article 370 and so on. And he's also come out in support of the government in this instance. Mr. Blackman, let me begin by asking you that, you issued this strong statement saying that there was no need for the UK to comment or instruct the people of India. But your own minister has said that while agriculture policy is a domestic matter of the Indian government, it can still raise difficult issues with India. Tan Desi, you just heard, saying human rights is universal.
Yeah, no, I think the key issue here is that the matter of the farming laws in India are a matter for the national government of India and obviously for the state governments of the various different states that make up India. It's not a matter for the United Kingdom government to interfere or make any comment on. Clearly, where there are concerns about other aspects of human rights or other issues in terms of trade with India, for example, it's quite clearly something that falls within the competence of both the government and also the UK Parliament. It's not for us to interfere in what are sovereign matters for India. And indeed, I take the same view on internal security. The reality is that I think it's right that people have the opportunity to protest peacefully. But when those protests turn violent, it's a matter of backing up the security forces who then have to enforce the rule of law. And I think, unfortunately, many colleagues in Parliament seem to have either watched videos, which are, of course, you have to have caution over these videos because they are clipped and they just show what the people who are displaying them want you to see, as opposed to the entirety of what actually has gone on.
But at the same time, Mr. Blackman, when you say that there should be no interference in India's affairs, isn't it also true that you have repeatedly campaigned for the BJP and for Mr. Modi? You've asked your constituents at events organized by the Overseas Friends of the BJP to vote for the BJP in the Indian elections.
Yes, indeed. And I have 37% of my electorate have come from Gujarat in the first place. Many of them have got the opportunity, obviously, to vote in the Indian elections. There's no difference between what we as politicians do, both in the United Kingdom and in other parts of the world, where we combine with politicians of other parties that we consider to be our natural allies. As far as I'm concerned, the natural allies of the Conservative Party are indeed BJP in India. So therefore, it's only natural that I would help campaign for them. And indeed, I have been a strong and remain a very strong supporter of Overseas Friends of BJP. In the same way as I have, and the Conservative Party in the UK has tie-ups with other political parties right across the globe. We have obviously arrangements with our friends in America, in Canada, in New Zealand, Australia, and around the world, particularly in ex-Commonwealth countries.
But doesn't that, Mr. Blackman, or how does that not amount to interference in Indian politics, foreign interference in Indian politics?
No, far from it. I mean, the activities that I, as a community leader in my constituency, get involved in are quite right. I have nothing against members of Parliament deciding to campaign for particular political parties in other countries. That's their choice. The difference here is when we start as a parliament to start commenting on the sovereign matters of another country, I think there's a great danger in what is potentially going to happen as a result. I mean, I don't think that we in the UK Parliament would be very happy if the Indian Parliament decided to debate Brexit, for example, or other things that are associated with the United Kingdom. We'd be saying, and I'm sure many of my colleagues would say, well, why are they interfering?
No.
So I think we have to be clear that there's nothing wrong with us speaking out, as I do and others do, on matters that affect my constituents.
All right.
Many of whom, as I say, have very close ties with India, with Gujarat in particular, and have a strong feeling about these. They expect that from me as a community leader, and I will continue to speak out on their behalf. I've nothing against other colleagues if they wish to speak out on a contrary view, and that's of course their choice. What I'm concerned about here is using the UK Parliament as a platform for these type of debates. All
right, interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Blackman, for joining us. Let's go to panel. We have with us Kamal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, Suhasini Haider, National Editor, Diplomatic Affairs Editor, The Hindu. Thank you so much for patiently listening in. Suhasini, let me just start with you. Firstly, have you ever come across something like this with the UK Parliament, debating an Indian law, the Indian government pulling up the British High Commissioner? And also, was the MEA not able to anticipate any of this?
Well, a lot of this has not happened in the recent past, perhaps. But even just 2 years ago, I can remember the Indian government issuing démarches over the kind of protests we saw in London over the Citizenship Amendment Act. I do think that these things do happen, and when there is a debate, maybe in the last few years, last few decades, we haven't seen something like this. But when there is this kind of debate about Indian laws, also the handling of Indian protests, I think it's quite natural. We saw the Indian government's reaction to the Canadian Prime Minister and other leaders in Canada speaking about it. I do think that there is a growing number of people in different polities talking about issues inside India. I do think that there is a growing amount of reactions coming from the MEA. But I think this is now a part of globalization. It is part of the fact that we are discussing each other's issues. After all, during the Citizenship Amendment Act, in our parliament, we discussed human rights in Pakistan, human rights in Afghanistan, the condition of minorities in Bangladesh. Those were discussed by our members of parliament.
Right.
We were for an Indian law, but we did discuss the issues. Now, you can debate whether the British Parliament should have brought up this issue, and certainly it does seem very interference in India's affairs, but they have a system of petitions, I think. And when any kind of a petition hits 100,000 signatures,
that's right,
the petitions committee in Parliament is bound to vote it. So it's not as if the government brought this petition into Parliament.
That's right. It was a petition debate, as they put it. But at the same time, Mr. Sibal, the fact that, in a way, what we've seen with this government and particularly with this Prime Minister has been to leverage, perhaps more aggressively than any in the past, the diaspora for, in a sense, political ends. We saw the Howdy Modi events, the slogans of Ab Ki Baar, Trump Sarkar. Is that kind of now coming back to haunt us, as now the diaspora also equally, which is critical of what the government is doing here, is now using its clout to bring attention, either through parliament debates or otherwise, on what they believe is unjust or unfair practices in India?
Well, I don't think what you're saying is entirely correct, because we've had problems with Sikh militants in Britain and in Canada and the United States, which far predates Howdy Modi event or anything of the kind. It's a long-standing issue. We know this. So let's
Sikh
not
militants. But this is not. This is not Sikh militants now. These are members of parliament. These are 16 members of parliament.
They are supporters of Sikh militancy. Well, you have Sikh militants and even Khalistani supporters in the Canadian cabinet. I mean, why obfuscate these issues? It's a reality. nothing wrong in recognizing this. So we've had a problem with a particular part of our diaspora for a long time, and with the Sikh diaspora right from the middle 1980s, when we had a huge problem of terrorism in Punjab. So therefore, let's not mix up these issues. That is the one. Number two, I think the vast majority of the diaspora is not involved in these protests or in parliament or begging for parliament debates and this and that. Is only restricted to 3 countries, which is Britain, Canada, and the United States. The United States has been a little more reticent, but our diaspora, Sikh diaspora in particular, has been able to manipulate the British and the Canadian for parliament.
But hold on, sir. On one hand,
let's not.
No, you're saying on one hand one shouldn't exaggerate this, but if you saw the reaction from the Indian government, it was quite strong. If this was something that insignificant,
it could have been stronger.
Why would you summon the High Commissioner? Why would you say this is gross interference in the politics of another country? British MPs should refrain from practicing vote bank politics. But let me just ask Subhashini that question. Subhashini, on one hand,
let me ask.
Yes.
No, let me answer that question.
Yes.
I think that the Indian government's reaction has not been strong enough, frankly. See, the point is...
You should have said you think it should have been stronger?
Oh, yes, because Nigel Adams' statements were totally unacceptable. They're very patronizing. They are offensive. He says we are following the farmers' agitation incredibly closely. Well, what does he mean by that? Is that the only work he has to do, to follow the agitation incredibly closely? Then he says we'll raise concerns with the Indian government. But does the Indian government share these concerns with the UK? He says there are strong feelings about protests, about the farmers' protests and media freedoms.
He also says while this is an exciting time, he says while this is an exciting time for UK-India partnership, it does not hinder our raising difficult issues. So he says that as well. So you're right that Nigel Adams, who's the Minister for Asia, has himself made some strong
Very patronizing. No, very patronizing. He's carving out space for Johnson when he says that Johnson will come and discuss these serious issues which cause.
But let me just go to Subhashini because we're running out of time. Subhashini, on one hand, one might turn around and say that this is not really a diaspora thing; it's limited. But we just heard those 2 UK MPs there. Each one is saying we are reflecting the views of our constituents who are essentially diasporic Indians. On one hand, you have Blackman, who has a large Gujarati community in his constituency. And so he's taking a very pro-BJP, pro-Modi card. And on the other hand, you have Tan Desi, who has a big Sikh constituency and who's taken that position.
I think what you are seeing, Srinivasan, is the outcome of what is called the double-edged sword of the diaspora. We cannot have a government that on one hand tries to say that the diaspora is a part of India, that the diaspora is essentially our family. That's what Prime Minister Modi said when he went to Houston. That to go around the world, have these big rallies that go on about the diaspora being as Indian citizens on one hand. And then on the other hand, when we say, yes, we feel a part of India, we feel a part of the Indian family, we have opinions, some of us will go out and protest against the some of them will go and write articles, people of Indian origin, some will vote for, some become politicians like Kamala Harris, like Mr. Rishi, who have very strong about what happens in India. Then you can't say, sorry, now you're a citizen of the country, so please don't interfere. That's one part of it.
Right.
The second part, as I said, is you cannot have a double standard.
Okay.
If India feels that we can discuss the minority situation in Bangladesh, or we can talk to Myanmar and discuss how they should run their government.
Then how can you stop? Okay. All right.
Don't get so
upset when others... We'll have to see. We'll have to see how it plays out, Mr. Sibal. I know you want to jump in, but I'm repeatedly being told we're completely out of time. We will come back to this, though. We'll have both of you back. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us on Reality Check. We're out of time. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.